The vineyard sprawled across the California valley like a quilt stitched with green veins, each row of vines stretching toward the sun as if reaching for salvation. Evelyn Parker walked its paths with the deliberate elegance of a queen surveying her realm. Her wide-brimmed hat shaded a face that bore the kind of beauty that endured, sculpted cheekbones, silver threads woven through dark hair, and eyes that had seen joy and sorrow in equal measure. At 55, Evelyn carried herself with poise that silenced rooms. Yet in the quiet of the vineyard, her composure faltered. Her late husband, Richard, had poured his soul into this land. He had believed wine could bottle memories, preserve joy, and soften grief. After his death, the vineyard had become Evelyn's inheritance and her burden. Though profitable, it had lost its vigor. She had poured herself into schedules, expansion, and appearances, but not into the one thing she had always feared: change. That was why she had agreed, reluctantly, to hire Marcus Rivera. The consultants had spoken of him like a force of nature. An ex-soldier, only 30, who had turned his discipline toward agriculture. A man unafraid of stubborn soil. Evelyn had expected arrogance, perhaps even incompetence hidden beneath youth. She had not expected him. He arrived one golden morning, the sunlight painting his figure in bronze. Boots dusty, shoulders broad beneath a simple shirt, Marcus carried himself with an ease that spoke of strength unbothered by vanity. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape, his eyes steady as they met hers without flinching. "Mrs. Parker," he greeted, his voice low, resonant. "Evelyn," she corrected, her tone clipped, though she felt a strange flutter at hearing her name on his lips. They walked together through the vineyard. Marcus spoke of irrigation, crop rotation, and soil acidity, but not in sterile technicalities. He spoke as if the earth were alive, as if it had moods, secrets, and a pulse. Evelyn listened, amused and unsettled, for it had been years since anyone had spoken with such conviction in her presence. His hand brushed a vine leaf, and he smiled faintly as though it had answered him. By late afternoon, Evelyn found herself observing more than she admitted: how he crouched to test the soil, how the wind lifted strands of his hair, how his laughter slipped out unguarded when a dog darted between the vines. She scolded herself for the indulgence. Yet that evening, as she sat on her stone terrace with a glass of Pinot Noir, her gaze wandered to the guesthouse where Marcus would now live. Light spilled from its window, silhouetting him as he moved about, broad frame bending, rising, a body at ease with labor. Evelyn sipped her wine slowly, her lips curving against her will. For years the vineyard had been silent, holding only the echoes of Richard's voice. But now, with Marcus's presence threading through its air, Evelyn sensed a new rhythm. The land might yet bloom again. And perhaps, though she dared not name it, so could she. The days that followed unfolded like an unplanned symphony. Evelyn and Marcus worked side by side, their conversations moving from the soil to philosophy, from vines to the rhythm of living itself. He challenged her with quiet boldness, refusing to bend merely because she was older or wealthier. At first she bristled. But soon she began to savor the way he stood firm, his honesty a kind of intimacy she had long forgotten. One afternoon, as the sun leaned westward, Marcus plucked a grape and held it out. "Taste," he said, his tone casual, but his gaze holding hers with unnerving steadiness. Evelyn hesitated, then accepted. His fingers brushed hers, a fleeting contact that seared her skin. She placed the fruit on her tongue, biting gently. Juice spilled, sweet and sharp, sliding across her lips. Marcus's eyes lingered, and though the act was simple, Evelyn felt exposed, as if they had shared something far more intimate than fruit. She turned away, her heart thudding in defiance of her composure. Yet later, in the solitude of her chambers, she replayed that moment until her pulse refused to settle. At night she found herself restless. Sleep eluded her, and the expanse of her bed became a taunt. She would wander onto her terrace, gaze drawn inevitably to the guesthouse. Through his window she often saw him, sometimes hunched over plans, sometimes shirtless, his body lit by lamplight as though carved from shadow and flame. She told herself to look away. She never did. One evening, Marcus beckoned her to the cellar. "A new blend," he explained. She followed him down into the cool darkness, where barrels loomed like guardians of memory. He poured a glass of ruby liquid and handed it to her. Evelyn swirled, inhaled, sipped. The flavor was bold but unfinished, young and unruly. "It needs time," she murmured, her voice softer than intended. "Like some things," Marcus said, his eyes never wavering from hers. Silence stretched. The air thickened. Evelyn felt her breath falter. She lowered the glass, suddenly aware of how close they stood, of the heat between them. She turned away, retreating into dignity, but the echo of his words burned in her chest. That night, she dreamt, his hand steadying hers, his breath warm against her ear. She woke flushed, startled, her body betraying a longing she had convinced herself no longer existed. Passion, she realized, had not died with Richard. It had only been waiting for the right spark, the right gaze, the right man. The vineyard's quiet rhythm fractured with Serena's arrival. Evelyn had been walking the rows at dawn, the cool mist clinging to her hair, when the crunch of tires on gravel announced the intrusion. She turned just as a sleek car slid to a halt in front of the estate. Out stepped her stepsister, Serena, draped in silk and perfume, her golden hair gleaming in the weak light like it had been styled for a gala, not a visit to a vineyard. Her sunglasses were far too large for the hour, but Serena never dressed for reality, she dressed for attention. "Dearest Evelyn," she called, her voice bright with rehearsed affection. "I thought I'd surprise you." Evelyn's smile was polite, but her chest tightened. Serena only ever arrived when she wanted something. "To what do I owe this visit?" Evelyn asked, her tone cool as the morning air. "Rest," Serena said, sweeping off her glasses. Her eyes glittered with the sly confidence of someone who had never believed in consequences. "After that dreadful marriage fell apart, I thought, what better place to heal than your lovely vineyard?" Evelyn's instinct told her otherwise. Serena did not come to heal, she came to hunt. That suspicion hardened when Serena was introduced to Marcus later that morning. Evelyn had expected curiosity, perhaps even approval. What she saw instead was calculation. Serena's lips curved into a slow smile as her gaze traveled over him. "So you're the man breathing life back into Evelyn's vines?" she purred, extending her hand. The gesture was small, but she held it longer than necessary, her fingers curling lightly as though reluctant to let go. Marcus, ever respectful, shook her hand and withdrew quickly. Yet Serena's eyes glimmered with mischief. Evelyn saw it instantly, the way one predator recognizes another. At dinner, the performance began. Serena leaned close to Marcus, laughing too readily at his anecdotes, brushing her hair back so it tumbled down her shoulders, her bracelets chiming with each calculated movement. "Tell me about your travels," she pressed, her voice syrupy. "You must have such stories." Marcus answered politely, but his responses were brief, his gaze flicking now and then toward Evelyn as if to reassure her. Still, Evelyn's chest burned. She sat across the table, sipping her wine with regal poise, while Serena basked in Marcus's nearness. It was not just Serena's words, it was her body language. A hand that lingered too near his arm. A tilt of her head that exposed the smooth column of her neck. Her lips parted in feigned fascination. Every gesture screamed invitation. Evelyn told herself Marcus was too honorable to notice, but jealousy was a cruel master. It painted suspicion where none existed. Later, in the quiet of the hall, Evelyn confronted her. "Serena, don't play games," she said, her voice low, firm. Serena's smirk was infuriating. "Games? Oh, sister, I'm simply enjoying company. He's young. Youth prefers youth. Surely you didn't think?" She let the sentence trail, cruel in its incompletion. Her eyes sparkled with malice. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she refused to flinch. "This is my home. Do not mistake my hospitality for permission." Serena laughed softly, brushing past her. "Darling, men rarely ask for permission. That's what makes them interesting." The words sliced deeper than Evelyn cared to admit. She spent that night by her window, staring out at the vineyard bathed in moonlight. From her vantage, she could see the faint glow of Marcus's guesthouse, shadows shifting as he worked late into the night. Once, that light had comforted her. Tonight, it only fueled her doubt. She trusted Marcus, or tried to. But Serena's beauty was undeniable, her youth undeniable, her audacity undeniable. Evelyn remembered her late husband Richard, how steadfast he had been, how safe. Marcus was not safe. He was fire, and fire was easily stolen. For the first time since Marcus had stepped foot on her land, Evelyn felt fear. Fear that her rediscovered passion might not survive Serena's touch. The vineyard, which had awakened her heart, was now thick with tension. The grapes ripened silently on their vines, but within Evelyn, storms brewed. Passion had come alive, but so had peril. The days after Serena's arrival felt charged, as though the vineyard itself sensed disruption. What had been a sanctuary for Evelyn now throbbed with tension, each corner of the estate echoing with Serena's laughter, each hallway thick with unspoken rivalry. Serena quickly turned daily routines into theater. At breakfast she would appear in a silk robe that barely clung to her frame, her hair deliberately tousled, lips painted in a shade too bold for morning light. She perched on the counter instead of a chair, sipping coffee as though it were champagne. Marcus, already seated, would rise politely, his eyes respectful, but Serena leaned into the silence, letting her robe slip an inch off her shoulder as if by accident. Evelyn, seated across the table, tightened her grip on her cup. She watched Serena's calculated ease, felt the burn of jealousy in her chest, and reminded herself that Marcus had given her no reason to doubt him. Still, Serena's presence was a mirror Evelyn did not wish to face. Youth unrestrained, a beauty that flaunted rather than endured. One afternoon Evelyn descended into the cellar to find Serena tracing her fingers along the wooden barrels, her expression artfully wistful. Marcus stood nearby, holding a clipboard, his patience thinning. "So much history locked inside these casks," Serena said softly, her fingers sliding down the curve of a barrel as though caressing flesh. "And yet, they say the youngest wines taste the most alive." She turned, closing the space between them. Her hand brushed Marcus's arm, her nails grazing. "And you, Marcus, don't you crave something alive, something wild?" He stiffened, pulling gently away. "Wine, like people, deepens with time," he said, his voice firm, his gaze steady. Serena only laughed, the sound musical, mocking. "Oh, what a noble answer." That evening on the terrace, Evelyn finally asked, "Does she bother you?" Her tone was measured, but her heart pounded. Marcus exhaled, looking out at the dusky rows of vines. "She tries. But I'm not here for Serena." He stepped closer, the fading light gilding his face. His hand brushed hers, and the contact sparked like fire through her veins. "Then why are you here?" Evelyn whispered. "For this," he said, and his lips found hers. The world seemed to collapse into that kiss, firm, insistent, tasting of sun and wine. Evelyn melted against him, her hands clutching his shoulders as though afraid he might vanish. Her body, starved of touch for years, awakened with a hunger that startled her. When he pulled back, his breath ragged, he murmured, "I don't care about the whispers. Or Serena. I care about you." Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. She stepped back, dizzy, her lips tingling. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she felt both terrified and alive. The vineyard had witnessed her first surrender. The silence was no longer empty, it thrummed with promise, with peril, with possibility. Preparations for the harvest festival filled the vineyard with bustle. Workers moved through the rows, laughter and chatter mingling with the hum of machinery. Yet within Evelyn's house, storms gathered in silence. Serena had grown bolder, her charm honed into a weapon. One evening Evelyn descended into the cellar, drawn by the flicker of candlelight. She paused at the doorway and froze. Serena stood before Marcus, her body angled close, her hand trailing down the neck of a wine bottle in a gesture heavy with suggestion. "You're wasted on Evelyn," Serena murmured, her voice low, sultry. "She's refined, yes, but don't you crave something unrestrained? A man like you deserves fire, not restraint." Her hand brushed his forearm deliberately. Marcus jerked back, his jaw taut. "Enough, Serena." She laughed lightly, tilting her head. "Don't tell me you've never thought about it. You so young, so strong, and her so careful, so practiced. Doesn't it feel like playing safe?" His voice sharpened. "I said enough." The words cracked through the cellar, echoing against the stone. He turned as if to leave, and that was when Evelyn stepped into the light. The tableau stilled. Serena's lips parted in an innocent smile, Marcus stood tense and Evelyn's chest constricted. For an agonizing moment, doubt slashed through her. She had walked in on exactly what Serena wanted her to see, herself excluded, her younger sister radiant and daring. "Am I interrupting?" Evelyn asked, her voice cool but her pulse thundering. Marcus's gaze snapped to her, anguish flashing across his face. "Nothing happened," he said quickly. Serena only laughed, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Oh, sister, you wound me. We were merely talking." But Evelyn's heart was already bruised. She left with a stiff nod, retreating to her chambers where she pressed trembling hands against her face. She believed Marcus, but Serena's words slithered into her mind. Youth prefers youth. A soft knock came later. Marcus stood in the doorway, his eyes dark, earnest. "Evelyn, please," he murmured. "Don't let her lies come between us. Look at me. I only want you." Her defenses wavered. She stepped aside. When he kissed her this time it was different, slower, deeper, reverent. His hands framed her face, then traced the length of her arms as though memorizing her. Evelyn surrendered, her body trembling as his warmth enveloped her. Years of loneliness cracked open, spilling into the present like wine from a broken cask. That night they were no longer mistress and consultant, older and younger, but simply man and woman. Their whispers filled the room, each word a vow unspoken, each touch a declaration. By dawn, Evelyn realized something with bone-deep certainty. Serena could throw every distraction, society could whisper every cruelty, but her heart had already chosen. And it had chosen Marcus. But Serena was not finished. In the following days, Evelyn noticed the shift in the staff's demeanor, furtive glances, half-hidden smiles. Rumors traveled faster than harvest carts. Someone whispered that Serena had been seen slipping into the cellar late at night. Others muttered that Marcus lingered with her in corners. Evelyn told herself not to listen, but the whispers coiled around her ribs like thorns. Her conversations with Marcus grew taut. She questioned him about his schedule, about his meetings, about where he had been. Marcus answered patiently at first, but frustration simmered in his eyes. He had fought wars, now he fought the war of doubt. One evening, as the vineyard blazed gold beneath the setting sun, Evelyn walked beside him. Her heart churned with questions she had no courage to ask, until finally the words burst forth. "How can I be certain?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "You're young, Marcus. Serena is relentless. What if one day you—" She couldn't finish. He stopped abruptly, turning to her with fire in his gaze. "Do you think I'm that weak? That I'd throw away what we have for her?" "I don't know." The words tore from her. "I want to believe you, but she's younger, beautiful, and I—" He cut her off, voice raw. "You are the only one I see. You are the only one I want. If you can't believe that, then you don't believe me at all." Her silence answered for her. Hurt flashed across his face, sharper than any blade. Then maybe this was a mistake. He walked ahead, leaving her breathless and cold in the evening air. Later, Serena found Evelyn in the sitting room, swirling wine in her glass. She leaned against the doorway, her smile smug. "He's intoxicating, isn't he?" she whispered. "But men like him, they don't stay loyal. Don't worry, sister, if you tire of him, or if he tires of you, I'll be here." Evelyn's hand tightened around the stem of her glass until it threatened to shatter. She said nothing, but her silence gave Serena victory. That night Evelyn lay in her wide bed, the sheets cold, her chest hollow. She had rediscovered passion only to feel it slipping away. Outside, the vineyard glistened beneath the moon, ripe with fruit, but inside her heart, everything withered. The fracture had come. And Evelyn feared it might never heal. The valley unrolled its golden carpet for the harvest festival. Lanterns swung from wires strung between oaks. Tables wore white linen and late summer roses. A small band rehearsed beneath a sycamore whose leaves had begun to bronze. All afternoon the vineyard hummed, barrels rolled, platters were dressed with figs and prosciutto, and the scent of thyme and charred lemon drifted from the outdoor grill. It was the kind of evening that made memory greedy. Evelyn moved through the preparations with the gracious authority that had defined her for years, yet her composure felt borrowed. She had slept little, and where sleep should have mended, doubt had stitched new seams. She checked the glassware twice, then adjusted a lantern that didn't need adjusting, tasting the salt of her own restraint. Marcus kept to the rows, directing crews with steady gestures, but every time she glimpsed the clean line of his profile, longing pulled at her like tide on a mooring rope. Serena arrived late, of course, gliding through the courtyard in a dress the color of ripe pomegranates, hair pinned to look undone, mouth painted like a dare. She kissed cheeks, scattered compliments like confetti, and slipped into conversations with the sleight of hand of a magician. Evelyn felt the tremor of impending spectacle move through the guests. Some people bring weather with them, and Serena was all thunderheads. Music began, something bright and unpretentious, and the air took on festival courage. Workers and guests mingled, a chorus of laughter rising as the first glasses of new season rose were raised. Marcus appeared beside Evelyn with a tray, not to serve but to anchor. "Taste," he said quietly, offering her the glass he had saved. "It's bolder than last year. The vines learned to breathe." She took a sip. "Tart, sunsweet, alive. Like some things," she murmured, and their eyes caught, one heartbeat of nakedness in a public square. She wanted to allow herself that soft landing, to reach for his fingers under the brim of conversation. But a hush spread with the stealth of a spill. The hush was looking past them. Serena had stepped onto the temporary stage where the band tuned. "A toast," she announced, face lit by lanterns and appetite. "To harvests, of fruit, of fortune, of feeling." She beckoned Marcus with 2 fingers. "And to the man whose hands coaxed this land back to life." It was the sort of invocation that dared refusal. Marcus set down the tray and climbed the 2 shallow steps, posture wary. Serena took his arm and lifted her glass. When the cheer crested, she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his cheek. It was the sort of kiss meant for photographs, lingering, theatrical, landing not on the mouth but close enough to suggest that the mouth was next. A gust of whispers rippled the tables. Evelyn did not flinch. Queens are trained against spectacle. But in her chest something slipped, like a bead from a broken thread. The band faltered and then recovered, launching into a faster tune as if to shake the air clean. Serena, pleased, leaned closer to murmur something for Marcus alone. He stepped back, not a retreat, a line. Enough, he said, and though he spoke low, the word carried through wood and glass. A violinist turned his head. A child stopped mid-run. Serena's smile thinned. Don't be dour. It's a party, she chided, letting her fingers skate the air between them like a promise. Let them see what they already suspect. What they'll see, Marcus answered, voice steady as the grain in oak, is a man who knows his heart. He didn't look at Serena when he said it. He looked across the lawn, through lanterns and faces, until his gaze found Evelyn where she stood anchored to nothing but breath. The moment buckled, the kind where future and past are two wines meeting in one glass. Evelyn felt the urge to flee, to the cellar, to the old rituals that required no bravery. Instead she lifted her chin. She would not hide her life from her life. The world, greedy for story, leaned closer. Serena, unwilling to surrender the narrative, caught Marcus's lapels and tugged him downward, planting a second kiss, this one faster, a bright wound of lipstick near his mouth. Cameras, phones really rose like a flock of birds. It was, in tactical terms, a clean strike. Marcus closed his eyes a beat, then opened them with a steadiness that frightened pretense. He caught Serena's wrists, not cruelly, firmly, removed her hands from his chest, stepped aside and climbed from the stage without theatrics. He crossed the grass toward Evelyn as if the lawn were a bridge he had been building for months. Evelyn, he said when he reached her, no microphone, no permission, but the valley heard anyway. I'm done arguing with shadows. His hand was open between them, palm up. He was not pulling, he was inviting. Come stand where we can be seen. The band, as if relieved to play a love scene, slipped into a waltz. Somewhere a glass fell and didn't break. And Evelyn, who had spent a decade practicing the art of surviving without appearing to need anything, felt the strange courage of desire steady her spine. She did not take his hand. She laced her fingers through it, and the orchard of lanterns shook a little as if a breeze had finally arrived. Around them, approval and malice traded places like dance partners. Serena's mouth finished curving into a smile that had no joy in it. But the night had turned. The harvest had chosen. They did not kiss there. Evelyn would not give the ravenous moment that feast. Instead, she let Marcus lead her to the dance floor, where the lawn had been tamped flat and the grass made temporarily obedient to the feet of strangers. His hand rested at the small of her back, not possessive, present. Bodies parted to give them room as if instinctively protective of something delicate. They moved to the waltz with a competence that surprised them both. I don't remember learning this, Marcus said, a smile flickering. Your body remembered, Evelyn answered, and the truth of that sentence loosened a knot in her. Her body, too, remembered, the geometry of being held, the old math of trust. She floated nearer, and his breath touched her temple with the intimacy of a promise. The music swelled, and whispers bent toward them like wheat in a common wind. In the neighboring cluster of tables, investors threaded concern into curiosity. A board member's spouse tried to capture the moment on her phone and was intercepted by a worker with an easy joke and a blocking shoulder. The vineyard has its loyalties, vines have memories. Serena did not retreat. She orbited, laughing loudly, recovering her audience by sprinkling insinuations like sugar. Twice she drifted close enough that her perfume grazed Evelyn's senses, gardenia over iron. Brave, she murmured once as she passed, a compliment cut with brine. My courage is older than your adolescence, Evelyn replied without turning her head. Marcus's fingers briefly tightened, then eased. He would not fight Serena while holding Evelyn's back. He would rather hold the music still. When the song ended, applause erupted, the generous kind given to a couple who have done something difficult in an unfriendly room. Marcus inclined his head, but he did not release her hand. He led her instead toward the long table at the lawn's edge, where the first plates were being set down, grilled peaches glistening with honey, lamb perfumed with rosemary, a salad of shaved fennel and orange. The colors were a treaty. They ate little. It is hard to taste while being tasted by the crowd. Yet the small common acts, passing the salt, splitting a bread heel, wiping a smear of oil from his thumb with her napkin, became a cord knotted between them. I'll speak to your board, he said quietly. If I can steady the optics, I will. You owe them nothing, she answered. And I owe them only the truth, that the vines are stronger this season, and so am I. A toast began 3 tables down. What it celebrated hardly mattered, the way thunder sometimes honors rain that fell somewhere else. In the pause before the next song, Evelyn's daughter arrived, drawn by texted rumors. Sophie stood with her arms folded, a child no longer, a protector still. Her eyes moved from Serena's bright smile to Marcus's steady posture to Evelyn's unbroken poise. Mom, she said low, is this wise? Wisdom is a late guest, Evelyn replied, gentling her tone. But it always brings bread. Sophie's jaw worked. Then the muscle in her cheek softened. Is he kind? Yes. Then I can accept the scandal, Sophie said, though her glance at Serena contained a small murder. She kissed her mother's cheek and went to recruit staff into a phalanx that would keep cameras pointed at lanterns instead of faces. The band shifted to a slow song whose melody seemed to remember rain. Marcus stood, and Evelyn, to her own surprise, wanted air. Walk me, she said, and together they slipped away from the press of celebration into the cooling rose. The night gathered around them like velvet. Crickets wrote insistently in the dark. I should have protected us sooner, Marcus said, voice roughened by long-held restraint. I kept hoping the work would speak, that your steadiness would be a shield. I forgot the world prefers stories to results. Evelyn brushed the back of his hand. You protected the vines. I hid my heart among them. That wasn't your fault. He stopped where a row widened to accommodate a tractor and turned to her fully, lantern light from the distant lawn breaking in his eyes. I love you, he said without flourish, like a sentence carved into wood. I love the woman who tells moonlight the truth and bargains with no one but the seasons. Her breath left her like a tide returning to its god. She had been loved before, faithfully, in a different grammar. This was a new language, part weather, part earth. Then love me in the open, she answered. We'll pay the tariff of other people's words, but we won't owe them our silence. He smiled, a small, astonished thing. In the open, he repeated, and they sealed the vow not with spectacle but with the press of their foreheads, a quiet sacrament under constellations that looked like spilled salt. From the lawn, applause rose for something else entirely. The valley keeps many celebrations at once. But in the narrow church of vines, 2 people had laid down fear and picked up their names. Morning arrived with the flat brightness of consequence. The first articles were already live. Photos cropped to exaggerate Serena's proximity to Marcus, captions steeped in sly certainty. Talk radio turned the Harvest Festival into a parable. A blogger with a busy vocabulary declared Evelyn a cautionary tale wearing good shoes. The world had its sport. Evelyn met her team at the conference table whose edges had heard a decade of decisions about barrels and balance sheets. She wore charcoal linen, hair pinned with the severity of someone who refuses a single unbuttoned thing. Marcus stood at the far end, not as ornament but as oath. Serena did not attend. Spectacle requires distance to look like destiny. We will answer questions about yields, not bedrooms, Evelyn began. If asked about the festival, we will celebrate the growers. If asked about photographs, we will say, no comment, and pour them a better vintage. A few smiles cracked in the room, relief disguised as obedience. A hand rose. The board? I'll speak with them directly this afternoon, she said. If they require reassurance, I'll give it. If they require apology, they will not receive it. When the meeting broke, Marcus lingered. Let me take some of the heat, he said. Say I'm temporary, a consultant who overstepped. You're not temporary, she interrupted. And you didn't overstep. You came when I was drowning in certainty. You handed me a rope with your 2 simple hands. He looked away toward the window where the rows wrote their patient lines. I know 2 simple hands don't impress the internet. I'm not married to the internet, she said. I'm married to this land and, she paused, tasted the courage she had poured the night before, and to what we named under the stars. He stepped closer, not touching her. Proximity can be louder than contact. Then let me stand with you when you call the board. She agreed with a nod, and the nod warmed the room by an invisible degree. At 3 o'clock, the board assembled on screens like saints in stained glass, each framed by an office intended to suggest virtue. The chair cleared his throat. Evelyn, he began, we have concerns about perception. Perception is obedient to profit, she replied. And the vines have not been this strong in years. If our customers are more interested in my companion than in our Cabernet, we have failed at marketing, not morality. A brittle chuckle, then numbers, then the mammal smell of caution. They circled reputation as if it were a pond with an alligator sleeping beneath the surface. Marcus said nothing until she asked him to speak, and then he did so cleanly: soil metrics, irrigation adjustments, evidence of resilience. He did not mention love. He didn't have to. Steadiness has its own charisma. They ended the call with a schedule for follow-ups and an agreement to let outcomes win the argument. It wasn't a triumph, but it wasn't a noose. Neutrality can be a victory when history expects your surrender. When they stepped into the corridor, Serena was waiting as if summoned by the scent of resolve. She wore white, a costume of innocence, and carried a single grape between thumb and forefinger. "You're very brave today," she said to Evelyn. "Bravery looks beautiful on you. Almost young." "Cruelty ages you," Evelyn returned, not smiling. "And boredom is the death you've mistaken for glamour." Serena turned to Marcus, rolling the grape along her knuckles with a conjurer's grin. "You could still make this easy," she said. "One headline. A little confession. We were a mistake. Imagine how merciful that would sound." Marcus didn't look at the grape. "You're not a story I want to tell," he said softly, and walked past her with the politeness a man offers a door he does not intend to open. The day lengthened into that bright fatigue vineyards know after a harvest. Long shadows, hoses coiled like sleeping serpents, laughter from crews who had decided to outsing rumor. Evelyn stood at the edge of the slope and watched the valley exhale. She thought of Richard, steady and gone, and of the woman who had held vigil for his memory long after the candles were ash. She honored her past with both hands, then set it down gently on the altar of now. When Marcus found her, she didn't turn. She leaned back into him the way trees lean into a wind they trust. "I will not be curated by fear," she said. "I will not let her write our verbs." He wrapped his arms around her waist, the embrace a belt against the weather. "Then we'll write them ourselves," he breathed into her hair. "And if the world reads, let it learn our language." The sun fell. The rose darkened. In the first evening star she recognized not an omen but a witness. The festival's aftershock faded the way thunder does, leaving the air sharper, washed, honest. News cycles turned toward newer fires. The board settled into the comfort of numbers that kept smiling. And the vines, indifferent to scandal, began their slow march toward dormancy with the dignity of creatures that trust spring. Evelyn chose a morning with clean light to invite Serena to the greenhouse. An olive branch can be extended in a room of green. Dew still salted the leaves, the glass fogged at the corners where night was reluctant to leave. Serena entered with the careful tread of a cat who suspects the bowl has been moved. "I won't beg," Serena announced before the air completed its first circuit. "If that's what you invited me here for." "I invited you," Evelyn said, "to end the war you keep pretending is flirtation." She touched the leaf of a basil plant with the pad of a finger. "I'm not your rival. I am your elder and once, briefly, your shelter." Serena's laugh clinked like ice. "You're also a fool in love." "At last," Evelyn said, "something we agree on." A silence built, a small, tense house. Serena looked away, then back, eyes bright not with victory but with the gloss that precedes confession. "He never looked at me," she said, voice thinning. "I did everything right." "You performed want," Evelyn replied gently. "You did not risk need." For a heartbeat Serena was simply young, tired of competing, terrified of not being chosen. The window showed her reflection and for once she did not preen. "And you?" she asked. "Are you not afraid?" "I am," Evelyn said. "But fear is not a god. It is a weather report." She stepped closer, not to embrace, to bless with truth. "Leave my house today with your head unbowed. Leave my man forever with your hands empty. Build something that does not require the ruin of other women." Serena's mouth flickered toward a smile and then away from it, a bird testing wind. "You're very good at speeches," she said, but the spite had gone dull. "Fine. I'll pack." Evelyn nodded, and the greenhouse seemed to approve. One leaf clapped against another with a soft, wet sound. When Serena passed she paused. "You won?" she murmured. "No," Evelyn answered, "I stayed." Serena left without theatrical footsteps. Some wars end in a sigh. Later, when the truck bearing Serena's luggage rolled down the drive, Sophie came to the terrace with 2 mugs of chocolate the way she had at 12, on nights of thunder. "I looked at the comments," Sophie admitted, grimacing. "Then I looked at the vineyard. I prefer the vineyard." "Me too," Evelyn said, grateful for the lightness that arrived disguised as domestic peace. "He's in the north lot. Walk with me." They found Marcus fitting new trellis wire, sleeves pushed to his elbows, forearms nicked with the honest script of labor. He looked up, saw Evelyn, saw the truck's vanishing taillights, and read the chapter's end. He wiped his hands on a rag that had surrendered its original color and came to meet them halfway. "Stay for dinner," Sophie said to him before he reached them, the invitation a bridge. "We'll open the Merlot from the year Mom refused to admit she liked Merlot." "I like it when it's right," Evelyn said, and the three of them laughed as if the valley had taught them the same gentle joke. Twilight pooled, carrying the scent of crushed thyme and old wood. They ate outside, the table simple, the food honest. Marcus told a story about a desert night when the stars were so thick a man could walk on them. Sophie countered with a memory of Evelyn teaching her to parallel park using the winery's forklift. Laughter layered warmth on warmth until the evening decided it had been a summer all along. When Sophie cleared plates, Marcus stayed. The quiet they shared wasn't fragile. It was confident, like a rope properly knotted. He reached into his pocket and set something on the table between them. A grapevine cutting, its heel freshly dipped in rooting hormone, wrapped in damp cloth. "For your greenhouse," he said. "For us." She touched the tender green, astonished at the fierceness that surged in her chest for so small a thing. "You think we'll take?" she asked. "I think we already have," he said. "But I like proof that grows." She leaned forward and kissed him, not the desperate punctuation of crisis, but a sentence written for two voices. The lantern's flame made a small theater of their faces. The night consented. Later, when sleep finally came, Evelyn dreamed not of Serena's red mouth or of headlines that knew everything and nothing. She dreamed of Rose, endless, orderly, patient, under a sky that blessed the inconvenient, the late, the second. In the dream she walked with Marcus between poles of cedar and wire, and their hands swung unconsciously into the same rhythm. Spring arrived without asking permission. Buds formed with that tiny, scandalous certainty vines have when they decide to live. In the morning she rose early as always, and the mirror told her the truth with a kindness it had never managed before. A woman tempered, not spent, a mouth unafraid to be soft, eyes that had not chosen between grief and joy but braided them. On her terrace the valley opened like a book she was finally willing to read from the middle. Marcus joined her with 2 mugs of coffee that were not quite chocolate and not quite brave. "Tell me the plan," she said. "Prune what hinders," he replied. "Train what reaches. Trust the light." They stood in weather that refused drama, and watched their second bloom begin.